Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. This is the very first video for the Battle Royale Readalong. I'm going to be going through the prologues into and through chapter 20. I'll talk about what happens in each chapter, along with any particular scene that I liked or any particular lines I liked, as well as anything I was confused by or that I said, what the beep. So let's get started. The very first kind of chapter, it's a prologue before a prologue, but it's called Opening Remarks, and it's this commentary that's given by a pro wrestler from an alternate world. However, I believe that the alternate world is our world as it is today. And the reason why I think that is because the pro wrestler explains what a battle royale is. The first line is, "What? Battle royale? You're asking what a battle royale is?" And then it jumps in through what it is in the wrestling standpoint. So where all these wrestlers get together as a one free-for-all, last man standing type thing. And this pro wrestler also mentions a couple of wrestling names, such as Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith. Dynamite Kid was a real wrestler. He was a British pro wrestler, and his name was Thomas Billington. I don't really know too much else about him, but lists off a whole slew of other pro wrestlers as well. So that's why I think this alternate world is this world as it is today. Then it opens up into the prologue, and the prologue is a government memo. And this memo talks about how there was a breach in operating systems, and that even though there's this breach in the operating systems of the government, that they're still going to go forward with trial number 12. However, trial 13 and beyond are the ones that are going to be really scrutinized and investigated. This memo is sent from the Director of Defense to the supervisor of trial number 12. It's a nice prologue, and I really liked how it was done because it's not a full scene, but it's just a little piece of what we're going to get into later on. So then we get to part 1 of Battle Royale, and it's called The Games Begin, and it starts with the number of, there's 42 students. So instead of a chapter 1, there's a chapter 0, and that's the one we're going to be talking about first. So chapter 0 follows a bus full of high school students, or junior high students, from Shirioa Junior High in Japan. This is the 9th grade class B. We get an introduction into a lot of different characters. However, the main character that kind of is a limited point of view towards is named Shuya. Shuya is a typical kid of that age. He plays in a rock band, and granted, rock bands and rock music in general are part of band music. He used to also be an athlete, and, you know, he's just average as far as what it comes down to just being a teenager at that time. So other names that are mentioned in this chapter is Yoshitoki, who is Shuya's best friend, or at least one of his best friends. There's another guy named Shinji, who's also mentioned, who is part of that group as well. There's Noriko, who Yoshitoki has a crush on. And then there's Kiriyama, who is a little bit of a bully, and he's kind of the head honcho of the bullies. And then there's also Kawada, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's kind of this lone figure. He doesn't really exude a friendliness, so people kind of just leave him a little bit be. What I really liked about this opening chapter is that it's just showing how normal these kids are. That it's just this bus full of kids who think they're going on a school trip, and they're excited about it. Yoshitoki and Shuya talk about if they have crushes or not. It's then that Yoshitoki tells Shuya that he has a crush on Noriko. Noriko gives out cookies to her guy friends, and it's just this nice scene of them going on this school trip that turns so south, so very south. This chapter ends with the kids falling asleep. So some information that's going to be important later is that Shuya and Yoshitoki had been friends since they were in this Catholic institution for children. It's interesting because I don't really think that there's a lot of adoption in this. It's just that if you had lost your parents or you're not allowed to live with them anymore, you're taken to these institutions for children. And the one that they're taken to is called House of Mercy and Love. And there is information such as, how religion kind of plays into this world. But as far as the other chapters, it doesn't really come up too often. Like, there are kids in here who have some religious affiliation, so it's more along the lines of just kind of setting the guidelines that yes, there is religion, but there's not a state-run religion. I think there's also kind of a foretelling moment where when everyone's getting gassed, it's Shuya who notices that something's off, and him and Kawada are the last ones to fall asleep from the gas. So then chapter 1 comes along. Shuya is the first one to wake up. So he's the last to fall asleep, the first one to wake up. I think this denotes more that's going to go on later. He wakes up in this classroom that's very, very familiar. However, he knows that it's not his regular classroom that he goes to. But the familiarity actually comes from he's noticing everyone has been placed in their assigned seats. So all the kids, when they fell asleep, have been transferred to this classroom and then got put seated as if they were in their regular class. The end of this chapter is a man entering the room, and he goes over to the podium, and everyone starts to wake up during this. So he doesn't really say anything. He just goes to the podium, and the chapter ends with the man at the podium saying, all right, is everyone awake? Did you sleep well? And then no one responds to him. So it ends with not even these two really talkative gals just not saying anything. By the way, each chapter ends with how many students are remaining. So at the end of this one, it's 42 students remain. And as far as chapter 1 goes, I liked it because I thought it had a really good ambiance for this kind of horrible sinking feeling that happens. But it's a little bit of a short chapter. It's like 3 pages. So then we get into chapter 2. And the man who has come in introduces himself as Kinpatsu Sakamochi. And he says that he's their new instructor. Now, apparently he is from a character in a TV show, which I'm not familiar with, but it's shown that this is an alias, not his actual name. When Yuki Utsumi speaks up, she's one of the students, and says, I don't understand, that's when all the students kind of burst out into what's going on, why are we here, what's happening, did we fall asleep, who brought us here, all these questions that are circling around. Now, while a lot of these kids are speaking, there's a few who have kept quiet. The first one is Kiriyama, who is that king of the bullies. Then there is Mitsuko Soma, and she's this gal who kind of seems rough around the edges, has a hard exterior. And then there's also Shogo Kawada, who is also kind of keeping quiet. All 3 of these characters mentioned are just staring at the guy who's in the front, Sakamochi. Sakamochi tells the class in a line that still had a tingle go up my spine, even though I saw it coming. He says, today, you're all going to kill each other. And the chapter ends with these lines. Sakamochi maintained his broad grin and continued, your class has been chosen for this year's program. Someone whimpered. So that's the ending. The beginning of this book is just really good to me. It sets up such a scene of kind of that feeling of dread and that feeling of, oh, things are going to go so very wrong for these people. So now we get introduced that there's a program, and chapter 3 explains what that program is and also on how the program started. We also get to see from Shuya's third-person limited point of view, but Shuya's point of view about when he first heard of the program. And he heard about this program when he was in the 4th grade. He saw on the television them announcing the program, not really announcing that it's starting, but actually announcing after it got finished. The news anchor gives out information such as how long the program lasted, so whether it lasted 3 days, 4 days, whichever, who the winner was, as well as how many died by gunshot, by stab wound, by strangulation, all those things. Then it also shows the winner, and it has a line, the newscast displayed the apparent winner, a young girl in a tattered sailor suit uniform, flanked by 2 soldiers, her face twitching as she looked into the camera. And then it goes on to say that Shuya didn't know at the time, but that was his first look at insanity. So then it just goes on how, even though they knew this program existed, none of the kids really thought that they would ever be chosen for it because it was such low odds for their class to be picked. It goes back into the classroom, and there's a kid who's named Koichi who stands up and says the words, "My father is the director of the Kagawa Department of Natural Resources. There's no way my class would be selected for the program." Oh, Kyochi, how little you know. So Sakamochi says pretty much, don't you know that this is beyond class at this point, that it's beyond how much your parents make? And then he shows these kids the dead body of their teacher. Shuya gulped. Then he saw inside the half-open bag the teacher in charge of Class B, Mr. Hayashida. No, the former teacher. No, the former Mr. Hayashida. His cheap gray suit was soaked in blood. Only the left half of his black-rimmed glasses, the source of his nickname, Dragonfly, remained. So we have now the first death, and it's their teacher. Apparently, the teacher had tried to argue with Sakamochi that these kids should not be a part of this program, that it's unfair to them. We still have 42 students who remain, however. And actually, I jumped ahead a little bit. It's in chapter 4 that Sakamochi explains that the teacher stood up for them. However, Sakamochi is still explaining the program to them, or rather, telling them that they're going to be killing themselves. It's a lot of seeing other people's reactions, and it bounces a little bit back and forth. But then Yoshitoki speaks up. Sakamochi asks, what is it? And Yoshitoki asks, who they contacted to let them know they were in the program, because all the parents had been contacted prior to the program to let them know that their kids are going to be a part of this. So a lot of parents knew that their kids were going into it. And since Yoshitoki was in this Institute for Children, he's asking, who they told. In an effed up manner, Sakamochi tells Yoshitoki that he talked to Miss Ano, who was one of the, workers over at the Children's Institute. Sakamochi is grinning in this awful, kind of lascivious way, and Shuya asks, if something happened to Miss Ano. And we get this awful, awful piece by Sakamochi, so really putting the nail in the coffin that he's a horrible guy. She was like Mr. Hayashida, Nanahara. She resisted on your behalf. To make her obedient, well, Sakamochi paused before calmly continuing. I had to force myself upon her. Now, don't you worry, she's not dead or anything. And so this, I think, is just a line to really let you know that Sakamochi is a POS, okay? When Yoshitoki hears that, he tells Sakamochi that he's going to kill him. We get a paragraph of how Yoshitoki kind of has this horrible temper when it comes to people he likes being threatened or messed with, and he is an incredibly kind person. And so Yoshitoki just keeps telling Sakamochi that he's going to kill him. And these 3 soldiers have come into the classroom, and all 3 of them shoot Yoshitoki. Both Shuya and Noriko kind of have a visceral reaction, and Noriko goes to try and help Yoshitoki. And Sakamochi, tells them, you can't leave your desks. But Noriko doesn't really leave Yoshitoki's side because he's been shot, but he's still kind of moving a little bit. And then one of the soldiers, kills Yoshitoki entirely, while Noriko is right by him. Because Noriko left her seat, the soldier also shoots Noriko in the leg. And Noriko is refusing to leave Yoshitoki's side. And this is where Shinji speaks up, and he asks Sakamochi if he can help Noriko. So Shinji's really playing the game, and he raises his hand, calls Sakamochi teacher, and asks, hey, since Noriko is hurt, can I please just escort her to her seat? And Sakamochi says yes. Shinji asks, well, since Noriko is injured. Can we not postpone these games? And Sakamochi says, well, how about we just kill Noriko, though, then? And Shinji goes, just kidding. The end of this chapter goes through with a gal named Fumio, who, after all this has kind of taken place, leans over to talk with her friend. And she gets the knife to the head by Sakamochi, who I guess is just fed up that all these kids are not doing what he's saying. So that's 2 students who die in this chapter. And now 40 students remain. So now on chapter 5 is when we get the actual rules of the Battle Royale. And it goes like this. Each kid will get the following items: a random weapon, food, water, a map, and a compass. On the map are different quadrants and zones that the children can navigate, as well as letting them know that every couple of hours there's going to be a forbidden zone. If they're in the forbidden zone at the time mark, then the collars that have been around their necks, my apologies, I forgot to mention those, the collars that are around their necks will explode. Now, also to note, they are on an island, and there's boats that surround the island so that if the kids try to escape by sea, the boats will come after them and hunt them down. Now, the end of this chapter goes with Sakamochi having the kids take out a paper and pencil from the desk that they're at and writing down 3 times, "We will kill each other," and also writing down 3 times, "If I don't kill, I'll be killed." That's the end of that chapter, and 40 students still remain. Chapter 6 is where we get how the kids are going to go out one at a time. So they transition from boy, girl, and there's 2 minutes between each kid going out. The first kid who is called to leave the classroom is Yoshio. And this kid is bigger bodied than the other children, and he's kind of known as the screw-up that is in their class. So he's not a very liked person in his classroom. When Shuya leaves, he passes a note to Noriko to meet him. And he also sees a couple that were in the classroom pass a note to one another, or the guy of that couple passing a note to his girlfriend. And he's guessing it's to meet, at a place. They use the paper that they put that they'll kill each other with. So I really liked this chapter. As I said, it's still going with the very big ambiance of uncertainty that's going to happen. Shuya doesn't really believe that the other students will kill one another, that this is a crazy concept, and how could they do that? And they're not going to. So chapter 7 is Shuya going down this hallway to go outside. He finds the dead body of Mayumi, who is a girl in his class, and figures out that Yoshio had been the first one to leave, and he thinks that he's the one to kill her. Then comes a confrontation between Yoshio and Shuya, where Yoshio tries to shoot at Shuya, and Shuya grabs the arrow that Yoshio tries to shoot at him and throws it at Yoshio. Now, this one was, I was a little bit incredulous with how this goes down, because Shuya throws this arrow bolt at Yoshio and knocks him out with it. And I thought that was kind of weird. Noriko comes out, and Shuya grabs her and they run for it. So this is kind of putting a damper into his belief that his classmates are not going to kill one another. So he had been thinking all this time, surely no one in my class will do that to one another. And then he finds his dead classmate outside. Now, chapter 8 is Yoshio regaining consciousness. And it just goes over that his decision to kill his classmates and to go back and shoot his classmates as they're coming out of the school was a decision derived by fear that his classmates were going to kind of hunt him down first. So he had this really big surge of, oh, hootenanny, people are going to kill me, so I need to kill them first. The end of the chapter ends with Yoshio dying from a silver arrow bolt that he had been using to kill off his classmates as well. So that's 38 students left. Chapter 9 is a very short chapter. It's just this page long. And it just goes over that a student named Kazushi is the one who killed Yoshio after he found the crossbow that Yoshio had been using. And he justifies killing Yoshio because it's clearly him who killed this other gal who he had also found. Chapter 10 rolls around, and Shuya and Noriko stop to rest up, and they have this moral discussion of whether or not they can truly trust their classmates. Noriko gives a little bit of perspective to Shuya because Shuya had been saying, oh, I didn't think that my classmates would do that, and then Yoshio goes and kills one of them. So she says, in response to kind of this, is, you know how Akamatsu was such a timid boy? I think maybe he was scared. I know he was. You have no idea who's going to turn on you out here. I think Akamatsu, who's Yoshio, was convinced that everyone was going to come after him. That had to be terrifying. He thought that if he didn't act, he'd be killed. So pretty much just putting into words to Shuya what Yoshio was actually thinking during that time, is that he was so afraid that someone else was going to kill him that he thought, I need to be the one to kill first. So they go on with this moral dilemma, and it turns out that Noriko and Shuya both trust one another, and Shuya mentions Shinji, who is his other friend, and says, hey, let's go find him. It's really nice to see these kind of moral dilemmas that the characters are having, that Shuya really wants it to be where everyone gets together and rises up, and Noriko just isn't sure that people are able to do that because they don't really know one another. And I thought that this was a really well done conversation between the two. Chapter 11 comes along, and we know that Kiriyama is kind of leader of this group of boys who bully people, and Mitsuru is one of those boys who's in the group. Mitsuru goes to meet up with Kiriyama, who had told him to meet him at the south point, I believe it was, at the south end of the island. There's a lot of information about how Mitsuru really looked up to Kiriyama and really loved being his friend, and how they met and all that kind of stuff. When Mitsuru meets up with Kiriyama, he sees that there's a couple of bodies on the floor by Kiriyama's feet, and they are Ryuhei and Hiroshi, and then a girl, Izumi. Ryuhei and Hiroshi were also friends and in that little group of bullies, and Kiriyama had killed all three of them. Mitsuru, when he sees this, is at first in doubt, like, what the hell happened? And Kiriyama tells him that it was in self-defense, but the way that he says it, Mitsuru's like, but was it, though? And comes to the realization that Kiriyama killed these people. And then Mitsuru thinks, oh dear, and knows that he's in danger. But then Kiriyama shoots him before Mitsuru can really do anything about it. The chapter ends with kind of this thought process from Kiriyama just saying that he'd never really felt deep connections to anyone, and that he doesn't really regret anything. So there's that. And there it is, the sociopath that's on the loose on this island. So by the end of this, there's now 34 students left. Chapter 12, we see a couple that had been a part of the class, so Sakura and Kazuhiko, who had been dating for the last 2 years. They meet on the opposite point at the north point of the island, and they talk, about what they should do. They tell each other that I don't want to really be without you. I don't want to have to live with that. That can they really trust their other classmates? And then they hear someone approach, and when they hear someone approach, both of them jump off a cliff that they were at. And so those two kind of take the decision, I guess, into their own hands. A gal named Yuki was the one who was approaching, and she witnessed them jumping. Then comes chapter 13, which follows a gal named Megumi, who hides in this house. She remembers that she has a phone in her pocket. She tries to call her parents, and I really love that scene because they had been told that there are phones on this island, but that they're not going to work. And so she has a cell phone. She's like, the phones on the island may not work, but this one may just. And someone answers. She thinks it's her dad, and she asks her dad to save her. It's this really sad moment. Like, my heart went out to this poor girl because Sakamochi, the little bastard, answers and says, phones are not allowed. And she hangs up, and there's a another person who enters the house at that time, Mitsuki, and Megumi is trying to hide and not be found, and effing Sakamochi calls her back. So Mitsuki realizes that Megumi's there, and, you know, Mitsuki's crying, saying that she's scared, and that she doesn't know what to do, and Megumi thinks, oh my gosh, I was about to kill this girl. I thought I was going to have to kill her. And now I just realized that she's scared like I am. And so while Megumi and Mitsuki are having a hug-it-out moment, Mitsuki kills her with a scythe. And that's why you don't trust anyone in these games. And then it just goes into how Mitsuki is really good at crying on command. And that's where that ends. So chapter 13, after that, is where part 1 ends. And then we get part 2, which is called the middle game, and we get 31 students who are remaining. Chapter 14 starts out with the sun rising, and Shuya thinks about how to get out of the game with Noriko, so how they can both survive, and how they're going to find Shinji. He is trying so hard to be optimistic. The chapter ends with a speakerphone coming on. So then chapter 15 is Sakamochi announcing all the dead and the forbidden zones. At this point, Shuya and Noriko find a cat in the place that they're hiding. At that point, when they find the cat, Shuya sees another of his classmates named Tatsumichi. Now, in chapter 16, Tatsumichi and Shuya are looking at one another, and Shuya's hand goes to his knife for just in caseies, and that's where Tatsumichi attacks Shuya. And he has an axe on him, by the way. They end up getting into a scuffle. Shuya gets hurt with his ear. But then both of them fall down this hill. And Tatsumichi ends up getting killed by his own axe. He's trying to, slice open Shuya. And Shuya is holding onto him as they're falling. So Shuya forces the axe, I guess, to Tatsumichi's face as they fall. So that's how Tatsumichi dies. And he gets up from that and thinks, okay, how am I going to get back up to where Noriko is? And that's where he sees another classmate. And he sees Koichi, the kid who said his dad was an important person and surely his class shouldn't have been picked. And we also know that Kaioichi is holding a revolver. So that's the weapon that he had gotten. There's a great line that's in the second paragraph of chapter 17, which goes, Shuya perceived the gun's barrel begin to move. And this is a nice reminder that these kids are paranoid right now. All of them have weapons, and all of them are suspecting of one another. So there's this question of, did the gun barrel actually move? Like, did Kaioichi actually go to shoot Shuya? Now, it did appear that Shuya gets shot at by the class leader, because it says, the next instant he heard the explosive bang and saw a small flame envelope the muzzle. He thought he felt something hot skim just over his head, but he might have imagined it. So there's this moment where it appears that he has gotten shot at, but it didn't hit. And then Kaioichi starts going closer to him to try and shoot. And this is where Kaioichi ends up dying because Kawada, so that kid who didn't seem to be very friendly, comes in and he saves Shuya by shooting Kaioichi. And Kaioichi originally gets his arm blown off by the shotgun that Kawada has. And with just one arm, he tries to go back for his revolver that is being held by his discarded hand. And Kawada ends up shooting to kill him. Shuya is scared of Kawada at this point, but Kawada doesn't go to kill Shuya, and Noriko goes down to join them. And at this point, the three of them kind of come to this conclusion that they're not out to really hurt one another, and then they join up together to form a kind of coalition. So it ends with Kawada saying that, hey, we should find a place to hide. And then we get to chapter 18, which is just a page chapter with a girl named Yuko. She witnessed Shuya killing Tatsumichi, and she runs away. So then we're at chapter 19. Chapter 19 has Shuya and Kawada primarily talking about the game and how can people trust each other in this. So they have found a place to hide. And Kawada has some pretty good lines in here about the games and trust. And one of them is, he's telling Shuya, I haven't been in your class very long, so I don't know what everyone's like. both of you included. But what the hell do you know about Oki really? And this is the kid that Shuya had killed. Maybe someone in his family is badly ill, and he felt he absolutely couldn't let himself die here. Or maybe he was the kind of person who only thinks of himself. Or maybe he went crazy from the fear and lost all reason. Or there's this possibility. You were with her and you had teamed up. But how could he be sure you'd let him into your group? So it's just saying that in these circumstances and in this situation, people are, of course, going to behave in a manner that they don't normally because they're in this unsure situation. How is anyone else supposed to know who doesn't want to kill and who wants to just kill to survive or who is a sadistic person? So they continue on with that conversation and talk about, what it means to trust and team up and all that kind of stuff. So then we get into chapter 20, which follows two friends, Yumiko and Yukiko, who are hiding in this place. They primarily just eat and talk about, oddly enough, the boys that they like. So they take this time, Yukiko asks Yumiko, hey, who do you like? And it's this moment where they kind of lapse into this normality that they were used to before, even though it's extraordinary circumstances. Yumiko actually has a very similar thought process to Shuya, and she thinks that if she can just reach out to her classmates, that maybe they don't have to kill one another, that maybe they could all band together and somehow, some way get out of these games. This chapter was really interesting because there's not actually a lot that really goes on as far as, movements. But Yumiko and Yukiko talking about the boys they liked had this really nice feel of them trying to get back to normality. I think that if I was younger, I probably would have been annoyed at that scene. Like, why are they just talking about the boys they like? Why are they talking about that? That's not important right now. But that's not the only thing that they talk about. But it's this part where they're just trying to be the people they were before they were put into the situation. And I liked that feel of it. It was a really sad feel, though. It was the sad moment between the two of them. So that is the prologues to chapter 20. What did you guys think? What are the feels that you have? Is there anything that stood out to you in particular as far as lines or actions? Is there anything I missed or maybe didn't get exactly right? By all means, put it down in the comments below. And I wrote a list of all the characters who tragically died this first part. So know that at the end of chapter 20, we are down to 29 students remaining. If you like this video, give it that thumbs up button. If you like seeing my face talk about books, hit that subscribe button. And as always and forever, may you get lost in a book.